Most modern dams are built with an expiration date. Engineers rarely say it out loud, but many concrete dams are designed around lifespans measured in decades, not millennia. 50 years, 80 years, maybe a century if the maintenance is generous and the luck holds. Then, the cracks appear. Steel reinforcement corrodes, spillways erode, and reservoirs slowly fill with sediment. Eventually, the conversations begin about rehabilitation, replacement, or even demolition, which raises an uncomfortable question. If our most advanced engineering struggles to survive a single century, how is it possible that some dams built nearly 2,000 years ago are still working today? Not as ruins, not as museum pieces, not as archaeological curiosities, but as functioning infrastructure that millions of people still depend on every single day. One ancient dam in China continues to irrigate a plain that feeds millions. Another still guides water across farmland first cultivated when the Roman Empire ruled much of the known world. Others quietly control floods, fill reservoirs, and shape entire landscapes, centuries after the civilizations that built them vanished from history. So what did those ancient engineers understand that we so often forget? The answer is not stronger materials. It is not some lost technology. And it is certainly not aliens. The truth is far more interesting. Again and again, the longest-lasting water systems in history followed one quiet principle. They worked with water instead of trying to conquer it. Today, we're counting down 6 ancient dams that refuse to run dry, from the merely brilliant to the genuinely unbelievable. And by the end, you'll see why one structure built more than 2,300 years ago may be the most elegant hydraulic machine humanity has ever created. Near the UNESCO World Heritage City of Mérida, in western Spain, lies a reservoir that still looks surprisingly modern. Its shoreline curves gently through the landscape. People swim there. Locals fish there. On a warm summer afternoon, it can seem less like a Roman engineering project and more like an ordinary lake. But that lake exists because of a dam built nearly 2,000 years ago. The Proserpina Dam dates to the late 1st or early 2nd century AD, when Mérida was known as Emerita Augusta, one of the most important Roman cities in all of Hispania. At roughly 427 meters long and about 22 meters high, it was a substantial structure for its era. What's truly remarkable is how the Romans chose to resist the water. Most people imagine ancient dams as enormous stone walls. Proserpina wasn't. Instead, Roman engineers relied on a broad earth embankment faced with masonry, reinforced on the downstream side by stepped buttresses. The strategy was simple, but profound. Rather than forcing a rigid wall to withstand enormous pressure, they spread the load through sheer mass. Earth absorbed the forces. Seepage could be managed instead of feared. Stress was distributed across the whole structure rather than concentrated in a single fragile line. It was less dramatic than a towering stone barrier and far more forgiving. And that forgiveness is exactly why it survived. Modern engineers know that rigid structures often fail precisely where flexible systems endure. Proserpina anticipated that lesson nearly 2 millennia early. Today, the reservoir remains one of the defining features of the landscape around Mérida, a city whose Roman heritage is recognized by UNESCO. The Romans understood something essential. Mass and drainage often outlast brute strength. But while Roman engineers were spreading loads across earthen embankments, another civilization on the far side of the world was discovering a completely different secret to longevity. Not permanence through strength, but permanence through continuity. In Osaka Prefecture sits a reservoir whose history reaches back to around 616 AD. Sayama Pond is considered Japan's oldest dam and reservoir, and unlike so many ancient structures, it was never abandoned. For more than 14 centuries, it has served the same fundamental purpose, providing irrigation water and helping manage floods on the plain below. That alone would be impressive. But the real story lies inside the dam itself. Ancient builders raised the embankment using packed earth reinforced with timber frameworks, placing and compacting the soil layer upon layer in a way that gave the whole structure remarkable stability. Yet no engineer ever expected it to last forever on its own. In fact, the opposite was true. Sayama-ike survived because generation after generation accepted responsibility for it. Dynasties changed. Wars came and went. Governments rose and fell. And through all of it, the dam remained. Because each generation repaired it, expanded it, strengthened it, and passed it on. Over time, the reservoir became less a piece of infrastructure and more a living partnership between people and landscape. Today, excavated sections of the ancient embankment reveal those layers stacked across the centuries, almost like tree rings recording the history of maintenance itself. And that may be the most important lesson Sayama-ike offers. Maintenance is not evidence of failure. Sometimes maintenance is the design. Modern infrastructure usually chases maximum performance with minimal intervention. These ancient engineers pursued a quieter goal: to build something a community could care for indefinitely. 1,400 years later, that philosophy appears to have worked. Yet even Sayama-ike's extraordinary lifespan is surpassed by another dam whose core has endured since the age of emperors, and which, unlike Japan's continually renewed reservoir, has remained astonishingly close to its ancient form. Southwest of the city of Homs lies a broad sheet of water known as Lake Homs, or Lake Katina. Holding it in place is one of the oldest large dams still operating anywhere on Earth. The structure is generally associated with the reign of Emperor Diocletian, around 284 AD. Some accounts suggest far older origins, but those claims remain disputed. What is certain is that the Roman-era dam became one of antiquity's most ambitious hydraulic projects. Stretching roughly 2 kilometers, it created a vast reservoir that transformed the entire region around it. At first glance, the design seems almost unimpressive. There is no towering wall, no dramatic cliff of stone. Instead, the engineers built something long, low, and patient. A broad earth and masonry barrier holding back a relatively shallow lake. And that simplicity may be exactly why it survived. Tall dams concentrate enormous forces. Every additional meter of height multiplies the pressure behind it. But long, low structures spread that stress gently along their length. Keep the reservoir wide instead of deep, and the hydraulic loads stay manageable, while the most catastrophic failure mechanisms never get the chance to begin. In essence, the builders shrank the problem before they ever tried to solve it. That single decision allowed the dam's core to endure for centuries. The structure was modified and raised during the 20th century, yet the Roman foundation still remains part of the system, and the reservoir continues to supply water to the Homs region today. Again, the same pattern emerges. The ancient builders weren't trying to overpower nature. They were trying to negotiate with it. Keep the water calm, keep the loads low, give the structure room to endure. It's an elegant philosophy. But Rome's most fascinating hydraulic legacy wasn't built inside the empire at all. It emerged out of one of Rome's greatest military disasters, and it would fuse the engineering of 2 rival civilizations into a single, astonishing system. The story begins with a captured emperor. In 260 AD, the Roman Emperor Valerian was defeated and taken prisoner by the Sassanid king Shapur I. It was one of the most shocking reversals in Roman history, a living emperor in enemy hands. But the consequences reached far beyond politics. Among the captives were Roman engineers and craftsmen, and their knowledge would soon be redirected toward one of the most extraordinary hydraulic systems of the ancient world. Bande Kaisar, often translated as Caesar's Dam, formed the heart of the larger Shushtar hydraulic system in what is now southwestern Iran. And it was far more than a dam. It was a dam, a bridge, and a weir all at once, and the centerpiece of a sprawling irrigation network. Rather than simply storing water, the system reached out and manipulated an entire river. The Karun was partially raised and redirected into canals that fanned out across the surrounding land. Water flowed where the engineers wanted it to flow, into fields that had been dry, toward settlements that needed a reliable supply, until an entire region grew more productive than it had ever been. The genius of the design lay in its purpose. Most people think of a dam as a barrier. Bande Kaisar was something different. Its primary goal was never to stop the water. It was to guide it, to lift it, redirect it, and distribute it. The river stayed alive. The engineers simply persuaded it to take a new path, and the way they did it was deceptively clever. A line of stone piers and arches carried the structure across the river, while a weir crest along its base raised the water level upstream. The same wall that lifted the Karun also let it pass through and carried traffic over the top. It was a single piece of infrastructure doing three jobs at once, more than 17 centuries ago. Today, the Shushtar historical hydraulic system stands as one of the world's great engineering landmarks, recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2009. Remarkably, parts of the broader system still channel water from the Karun. It endures as a rare fusion of Roman technical skill and Persian hydraulic vision. Two empires, one river, and one enduring lesson. The most successful water systems redirect a flow rather than resist it. Yet even this is not the oldest water control structure still serving its original purpose. For that, we travel to southern India, where a single river has been quietly feeding a civilization for nearly 2,000 years. Across the Kaveri River in the state of Tamil Nadu stretches a structure that looks, at first, almost humble. No giant wall dominates the horizon, no reservoir stretches beyond sight. It appears far too simple to be one of the most important hydraulic works ever built. That impression could not be more wrong. Known as Kallanai, or the Grand Anicut, the structure dates to roughly the 2nd century AD, during the reign of King Karikala Chola. Built from stone and rubble set in clay, it runs about 329 meters long, 20 meters wide, and a little over 5 meters high. Its purpose was quietly revolutionary. Not to block the river, not to drown a valley under a massive lake, but to guide the water into the fertile delta beyond. And that distinction is everything. A traditional dam fights the river. Kallanai cooperates with it. Engineers today would call it a diversion weir, a structure that gently alters the flow, coaxing part of the river to spread through channels across the delta. During the monsoon, the Kaveri still behaves like a river. Kallanai simply nudges a share of that energy toward the fields. The result reshaped a civilization. The Kaveri Delta became one of India's great agricultural heartlands, and even today the system supports irrigation across more than 400,000 hectares, sustaining vast farming communities. Modern regulators have been added over the centuries, and control has steadily improved. Yet the ancient Chola core remains the foundation beneath it all. Nearly 2,000 years later, it is still performing the very same task it was built for. That is an astonishing achievement. And it captures, more clearly than anything yet, the principle we've been following all along. Feed the land. Don't fight the flood. Guide the water. Don't imprison it. But even Kallanai has one rival left, a system older than Rome, older than the Cholas, older than almost every hydraulic work still functioning anywhere on Earth. And unlike everything we've seen so far, it achieves its goal with a genuinely shocking twist. It isn't really a dam at all. In 256 BC, long before the Roman Empire even existed, the Qin state faced a recurring catastrophe. The Min River brought both life and destruction. In the wet season, floods devastated whole communities, and sediment choked the waterways. In the dry season, drought threatened the harvest. Most civilizations would have answered the only way they knew how, by trying to wall the river off. Li Bing and his son chose a radically different path. They decided not to stop the river at all. The result was Dujiangyan, and it may be the most elegant water control system ever built. The first surprise is that there is no great reservoir. The second is that there is no conventional blocking wall. Instead, three components work together as a single hydraulic machine. First comes the fish mouth levee, a slender, tapered embankment that splits the Min into an inner and an outer channel, automatically dividing the water as the seasons change. In flood, more pours safely out the outer channel. In drought, more is steered inward toward the fields. Next comes the flying sand weir. As the water curves past it, the excess flow and the heavy sediment it carries are flung outward, away from the irrigation network. In effect, the river is made to clean itself, flushing out the very silt that would otherwise have clogged the system within a single generation. Finally comes the bottleneck channel, a passage carved through solid rock that meters exactly how much water is allowed to reach the Chengdu Plain. Too much would flood it. Too little would starve it. The channel quietly balances both. What makes Dujiangyan extraordinary is that it solves flood control, irrigation, sediment management, and water distribution all at once, with virtually no moving parts, no gates to jam, no machinery to fail, just geometry and the shaping of flow itself. The system never forces nature to obey. It works with the river's own behavior, and because of that, it has proven almost impossibly resilient. More than 2,300 years after it was first built, Dujiangyan still irrigates the Chengdu Plain, and millions of people continue to live on water guided by principles laid down in the 3rd century BC. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the year 2000, and when the devastating Sichuan earthquake struck in 2008, the ancient system endured. At this point, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Proserpina spread the pressure. Sayama-ike embraced maintenance. Homs reduced the stress. Shushtar redirected the flow. Kallanai guided the monsoon. But Dujiangyan went one step further than them all. It never fought the river in the first place. It simply taught the water where to go. And that may be the real reason it has outlived every single empire that ever claimed to control it. 6 dams, 6 civilizations, thousands of years of history, and one lesson repeated again and again. Proserpina spread the load. Sayama-ike embraced continual care. Lake Homs stayed long and low. Shushtar lifted and redirected a river. Kallanai fed a delta instead of blocking a flood. And Dujiangyan shaped the flow itself. None of them ever truly defeated the water. They listened to it, And that idea feels surprisingly modern. We tend to assume that durability comes from stronger materials, bigger budgets, and more powerful technology. Yet these ancient systems quietly suggest something else, that real durability begins with understanding. Understand the river, understand the landscape, understand how the water wants to move, then build accordingly. So many modern structures spend their entire lives fighting nature, resisting the forces head-on until they finally lose. These ancient works did the opposite. They reduced those forces before they ever became a problem. Perhaps that's why some modern dams hope to reach 80 years, while these ancient systems have already passed 2,000. In the end, the real achievement was never engineering dominance. It was engineering humility, the wisdom to cooperate with nature instead of trying to overpower it. If you love real engineering, ancient history, and the stories hidden inside the world's greatest infrastructure, subscribe to MegaBuild Archive and keep digging with us. And here's a question I'd genuinely love your answer to. Of every dam standing in the world today, which one do you think is more likely to still be holding water in the year 3000? A famous modern megastructure, or an ancient system that already knows how to laugh?